I'm Scott Duncan-Fernandez here with Jenny Irizary, fellow editor at Somos, escrito. We're here today interviewing Armando Rendón, a native of San Antonio, Texas. He's the award-winning author of The Adventures of Noldo, books for young adults, the author of Chicano Manifesto, all of which are available as ebooks, and he's also the founder and executive editor of Somos, escrito. Here's the Adventures of Noldo book right here. So why don't we start off, Armando? Long time no see.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. Yes.
I guess the first question we may have for you is what led you to write the Noldo books?
Well, I had a lot of time on my hands because I had I retired from a 9-to-5 job in 2004, and I've been a writer all my life, basically since I was in high school. But as far as career-wise, I'd pretty much been writing for other people, except for Chicano Manifesto. It came out in 1971. I had pretty much from that, I gone into, a career as a public affairs and public relations. I did some teaching. Before I started writing this series, I've been teaching at a small college near Oakland here, St. Mary's College, Moraga, in the same field that I had graduated in, which is kind of remarkable. So I kept teaching after I retired. But for a long time, I had been really wanting to get back into writing, like for myself, so to speak, And so when I retired, I started really working on that with some, real consciousness and some purpose. And I looked at all different kinds of writing that, I had kind of attempted years back, or that, I like mysteries, and I like just general fiction. I like historical novels, I like science fiction. I've been reading science fiction since I was in high school. So I kind of explored those different areas, and I realized that I wasn't into writing like your standard kind of mystery or fiction, because I wasn't into violence and shoot 'em ups and sex and all that kind of stuff. But what really attracted me was writing for young adults. I mean, I just thought that it was also a need too. Talking about like really starting to get into writing around 2010, 2011. I tried my hand at poetry. I took a course with one of the top poets in the country, Brenda Hillman, around 2011. And I did write a chapbook. It's called Up to Earth. It's an echo poetry. It's a chapbook on what I call echo poetry. And I like doing that. I've been trying to keep that going, but I was really attracted to writing for young adults. I knew just generally that there's probably a need for that kind of literature to serve that that age level. And the more I looked into it, sure enough, it was one of the few areas that, or one of the key areas that was not really being addressed very much. There were a lot of children's, little kids books, and for adults, not as much as obviously that any of us here would want, but that attracted me, and so I put my hand to it.
Well, Noldo is a story about a young Chicano boy in 1950 San Antonio, where then he builds a scooter that turns out to be magic, and he travels to other times in history throughout in Texas. So it strikes me, did you base it a lot on memoir? I mean, it's a young boy, and like you grew up in San Antonio in the 1950s, correct?
Oh yes, in fact, I grew up on the west side barrio of San Antonio, which is for generations, it was like the first contact point for people coming from Mexico, coming up up through Texas. Some of them went on to, the Midwest. But like my folks, my grandparents settled in San Antonio in the early 1900s. So I go way back, not only in terms of my Texas background, but indigenous background, because both of them were of indigenous heritage, right? So growing up, I had a number of experiences, and at the time I didn't know that they were experiences. They were just life, right? And when I got the idea about working on stories for young adults, I looked around. I was thinking, what can I write about? What would be interesting? And one day I get one of those, slap my head moments. I said, well, I'll write about myself. I'll write about my experiences, growing up in San Antonio. So, one thing led to another. And what's really cool for me is that my interest in like historical novels, in science fiction, in just trying to write nice stories, it all came together when I started to think about what I had experienced. And I had actually built my own scooter.
Oh, right.
And I like a lot of kids did that in those days. We're coming out of this is I was born in 1939, which was just coming out of the Great Depression and going into World War II. So there was a kind of a double whammy of lack of resources. People weren't, all the automobile companies were producing tanks, and Jeeps and that sort of thing. They certainly weren't producing scooters, right? At least the kind that, made of metal and so forth. But I kind of knew what a scooter looked like and how what would be put together. And so that led me to thinking about, I finally settled on the name of my hero as Arnoldo, which is kind of, it's a good name, but he preferred to be called Noldo, right? And as I mentioned in the early stories, he didn't like people calling him Arnoldo. Only his mother and his grandmother, and sometimes his uncles and aunts could call him Arnoldo. He didn't like Noldo. So like I say, just I got the idea. I can't even remember. It was probably one of those epiphanies, that happened. I got the idea of writing about Noldo, and he builds his own scooter, and he tries it out, and I got this inspiration, I guess, that it's a magical scooter, right? That there's something about it that is going to, give him different adventures. Okay. Now, when I first wrote this first one, when he showed so quickly, this is the Battle of the Alamo. Okay, so I just got the overall concept of going back into time and at moments that were particularly of importance to Chicanos and Tejanos, right? And the Battle of the Alamo was certainly one of them. And so I got the idea of, he goes back to the Alamo like a couple of days before the Alamo, and he experiences this and that. And little by little, it just began to come together as a story about Noldo building a scooter, and his best friend across, next door, comes and helps him, and they draw a picture of it, and they start building it together, and they just go through the callejones, the alleys that were in the middle of the streets, right? There's streets, alleys, streets, and so forth, all through the barrio. So they go out and hunt stuff from the people that are thrown away, and they were just sitting there. They got some lumber. There was some nails in that old shed, that behind my grandmother's house. Those are an old Model A there. It's all kinds of stuff just to start building, stories on, and so that evolved into him going back into time.
I'd like to ask you a bit about the. Well, I mean, I want to get to the the historical research and the own the connection to history that Noldo has to find for himself. But also, it seems like to me the building of the scooter is a community effort, and Noldo is very much a part of his community. And he like you're saying, he goes from each person. And there's also there's a lot of traditional Chicano values. If let's say he puts together things. He doesn't have access to a lot of material things, so he puts it together himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can talk about
that was part of it. Yeah, that was definitely part of it. That he has to use his own, creativity, and get things that ordinarily nowadays kids go to some toy store and they buy it. And it costs $150 or whatever. This thing cost hardly nothing. I mean, but they didn't have to spend any money to get it. Just apply their creativity, their whatever skills they had in, using a hammer, stuff like that.
Yep.
But I think too, what I sensed about what I was writing was that I had to put some values into it, some community values. And that meant talking about his relationship with his family and with the whole thing. I don't always talk this long. So I wanted to introduce his grandmother, his grandfather has died sometime past. He has some uncles, he has some aunts, he has some buddies, and so forth, and involve them in the process of showing what day-to-day life was at those times. So this is where to me it was really kind of all coming together, because I got a chance to tell people, kids particularly, this is what it was like growing up in San Antonio in the 1950s, 40s and 50s. It's way different from what you guys have to deal with nowadays, and you've got it really easy. Okay. But then, as I say, I got the idea of Noldo going back to the Alamo, and I realized that I could probably do a series out of this, but I had to write the Noldo story first. I mean, you can imagine, right? You got ideas that start spinning out, but get this one thing done first, and so I had to figure out how he gets back to the Alamo. Well, it's a magical scooter, and the first time he rides it, he has a big crash. He kind of he's knocked out for a bit. And I introduced a curandero who lives down the street, a healer, and all of that works into the story. Because when he goes back to, when he wakes up at one point, all of a sudden there are no houses. There's a dirt track, it's kind of a road, and trees, a lot of mesquite and grasses and stuff, some trees here and there. That's it. All of a sudden, where is he? Right? And then the story kind of evolved from that.
Well, it seems like there are a lot of lessons in Noldo, especially when it comes to conflict, with the boy, the Irish boy, and when Noldo goes to see the St. Patrick's Brigade,
mm-hmm.
where they become friends and they learn about their shared history together, and they go back. that's I believe that's the only one he travels back in time with, right? He goes back to see the St. Patrick's Brigade. Both go.
Right, right. However, in that same story, he meets the boy that he has befriended at the Alamo.
Oh yeah.
Who was grown up and has moved down to Matamoros, where this battle takes place. The other side of what the Mexicans considered was a borderline. So for each episode, each different story, I had to figure out a way. Well, how does he get back to another time? And that one, he how did he get back? Oh, they're playing in the backyard with a bunch of other guys, and they fall asleep. And they've been chatting, whatever. So Noldo wakes up and his friend Pat is with him, right? And Pat is half Irish and half Mexican, which is not too uncommon in Mexico, particularly. Yeah. Some of my favorite friends are Irish Mexican or Mexican Irish. So out of that comes the story about how the San Patricios were created, and who they were, and so forth, and how they fought valiantly and so forth. So
maybe you can tell us about like the importance of history, like because you obviously researched the history in these books, and how like obviously history is like Noldo himself has to once he starts investigating, he has to go to the library, he has to find some guidance, because he doesn't get taught this history in schools. And so he has to find out for himself, and then actually travel there to find connection to Chicano history and American history through this magic scooter.
Right, exactly. It was also a vehicle for learning. Besides traveling back in time, it's a way to, and learning in many ways is magical. If you read books about travel or geography, they can take you back, or any fiction that you might pick up, a way of traveling. And in this case, there's some little gimmicks that I use to put him back in time, but it's the same kind of vehicle, the same kind of what do you call it, literary device. But it got harder the third time and the fourth time, and as to how to get him back to another time. how to get sneakier.
Well, I think like there's importance for these kind of books that have Chicano characters that like children can see themselves in, and other children can see a more true representation. I want to tell a quick story. I recall when I was a child, like a young kid, there was a series of time travel books that I read, and I didn't think too much about it. There was the main character was blonde, blue-eyed type Anglo kid, and he travels time, and he goes to something around 1915, and he comes across a Mexican American kid, and you would have thought that he came across an alien the way he described him. And I'm like a child, I didn't know, I just put the book down, and made me feel strange. I never read the series again. And I think Noldo, particularly, I enjoyed it now, but particularly when I was a boy, it would have made a big difference, because it's not this like othering alien making a view of Mexican Americans.
Right.
Maybe you can tell us a bit, like, why is it important for us to see ourselves, and why, and also you've also included Noldo in Spanish as well.
Right. Well, the first four books are bilingual, Spanish and English. But I use a lot of Spanish words, phrases from that time, in many cases, but also slang that has, that was obviously used in the 1950s, what we called it a calo, or the Pachuco, slang or way of talking. So that, all of that is part of the mix. Just because I lived it in many ways. I actually lived those kind of experiences. I had Well, here's another very valuable part of any, I think, any research, is if you have an informant, especially doing historical novels, if you can, somehow find a resource who, actually lived that time. And I was fortunate in that one of my uncles was really sharp. He lived to be 101 years old. And I swear he lived long enough that I was able to squeeze everything I could out of it. Bless his heart. But he was, he remembered so much stuff. And I would sometimes ask him, we talked, pretty often. And I said, his name was Theo David. And I would say, Theo, do you remember this? And I would describe it. He says, oh, yeah, one of the most dramatic things that happened with him was that for the fourth book, which is called Faces the Hard Times, Noldo Faces the Hard Times. And anybody that's into science fiction knows this, the whole paradox of time travel, right? You travel back and you meet your mother, and Back to the Future is all about that. The movie, right? Don't meet your mother, Christopher Lloyd. Don't meet your mother. Don't have anything to do with anybody, your sisters, brothers. And of course, he meets his mother, and she loves him. She has a crush on him right away. And he has a picture of his brother and sister, and they start to fade away, because they're disappearing. Then he starts to fade away. So it was that kind of dilemma that he was facing, because he did meet his uncles and aunts, but they didn't recognize them. Obviously, they had not known him before, but he did. So he has to find a way to get ideas to them, or communicate with them, that he doesn't cut through that time paradox, right? So he finds himself at one point trying to I won't get too much of the story away, but he's trying to get something resolved that he's facing, and he has to confront that issue, right? And how does he do it without giving himself away, right? And so a lot of that is about that kind of sci-fi nerdy kind of notions that a lot of science fiction. Like you look at Back to the Future as an example. That's a tried and true issue, going back in time. Oh, what I was going to say about my Uncle David. One of the very famous persons from the late 1930s was, I'm drawing a blank. Oh my gosh, cut. There was a famous a woman leader, it didn't come to me, I guess, who was very famous. She had been very active in organizing workers in San Antonio. And she was involved in this march that was actually took place in 1936. It was the following year that what they call the pecan pickers strike became very famous, and most people relate to that. But she was doing organizing before that time, right? So there's a march, and he gets involved with the march, and he meets it almost came out, and it turns out that I was doing research and I found some stuff about her and all this. One day I asked my Theo if he had known Emma Tamayuca.
Oh yeah.
Tamayuca, something, yeah. And he said, "Oh yeah, I went to school with her."
Yeah.
Oh my God, well, tell me about her. What was she like? How did she talk? And so he started telling me they used to cross paths in the quarters. He knew her, and then she knew him. But they were in different tracks. He was more on a college track or like going beyond high school, and he was more in a vocational track, which again, talking about those times, that was a really tragic thing because he was so smart, you know. Well, he's a story unto himself, but so he told me about how she spoke. I remembered her talking at assemblies, school, how she wore hair, how she dressed, and all this kind of stuff. How nice she was. She was, always, outreaching and stuff. So I put this stuff into the story. I mean, you can't ask for anything better than that, right? Like your own uncle met this famous woman, right? So that's just a matter of chance, but there was a lot of research, a lot of personal things that I remember, stuff that I got from my uncles and aunts. I checked everybody I could, and out came these 4 stories. Jenny, you had a question?
Oh, I was going to ask about out came a little bit earlier about having all of these ideas and sort of like a general idea of this character's life. And I was wondering how you organized that into the different books. Like, how did you write sort of a book and then another book, or did you end up at times writing more of the storyline and then later kind of splitting it up?
Actually, one book led to another. I mean, I didn't write storylines for each one of them, or because once I finished the first one, I had the premise, I had the characters. I knew that I had to have devices to have things happen, and one of the beautiful things is that there were times when, like, I would make up stuff, right? And then I would go around and, for example, I'm getting into another book that I wrote, the 5th book that I wrote, Noldo, and it's well, first of all, there's a battle of the Alamo, and then Noldo meets the St. Patrick's Battalion, right? It's the Mexican-American War, as it's called. And then Noldo saves the day, which is where, he actually witnesses the beginning of the revolution in Mexico in 1911 from El Paso. And then here's where the hard times is where he meets Emma Tenayuca and kind of displays or portrays what it was like to live through the Depression. In this one here, it was so cool because this is called The Wizard of the Blue Hole. And it's about Noldo, as I put it, he's older and bolder, right? When he gets into this adventure, he spent a couple of summers working with one of his uncles, so he's buffed up, quite a bit, and quite a young man, right, by this time. Well, he's only about 14 or 15, right? But so he gets into this situation where, he teams up with the curandero, the guy that he met, the curandero that you meet in the first book. He comes up again in this book as the good wizard who has a rival who is the bad wizard, right? Due to some kind of rivalry they had over a woman in Mexico and all that kind of stuff. But the Blue Hole is the headwaters of the San Antonio River, right? El Ojo de Agua is in Spanish, El Ojo de Agua. And in San Antonio, they call it the Blue Hole for whatever reason. Well, I think they had a reason, though. But anyway, he has the final scene is where he's having a battle, over the Blue Hole. And so I put in this, when I was writing it, I put some stuff in it that I kind of remembered, right? And I had no one to really tell me exactly what had happened. Like my aunt, Teresa, became a sister, a nun, and she actually lived in the building where the nuns, were housed on this campus, campus of Lady of the Lake, Immaculate Heart of Mary campus. It's now a university. And the Blue Hole, I knew from having research, was near the campus, the building. Well, I traveled there after I published this and everything. I traveled to San Antonio, and I went to the campus, and my cousin was with me, and we went to look for the Blue Hole. Well, I swear to God, it was exactly where I had thought it was. Now, there was in those days, I imagine there was a lot of trees, which is where, not oak and of course pecan trees and cottonwoods, alamos, and so we went down this trail past the building, went around and went down, and there's a darn thing. Now it's surrounded by rocks, like a wall made out of boulders from that area. It was dry at the time. In fact, it was dry at the time that Noldo has his battle. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. So there was an instance, and then other times that something similar happened where I had written something, and my God, that's the way it was, or that's how it evolved out of something I knew it, or I don't know. But something about the story, which is to me very exciting. I think, like I said, I only started writing fiction around 2010 or so. These 4 books came out within a period of 4 years, right? So, bang. I really think that the last couple kind of wrote themselves.
I wanted to ask about, I don't know San Antonio so well. I've been there a few times. I grew up in Texas. But I read your novel books before I revisited San Antonio somewhat recently. And I was a little bit shocked where like all these places, like, of course I knew the Alamo was real. I didn't know the Blue Hole was real. And so I was pretty shocked to find out that it existed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's you definitely based everything in like, this real place of San Antonio, and like, and it's, as it was in 1950s. And it's really interesting. And you've also like included like the Blue Hole was a sacred place for indigenous people, and you've included like different areas for that as well. So you left a lot of history and like interconnections there as well.
Well, San Antonio was originally populated by indigenous people. Different tribes take advantage of the waters there. And when the first settlers, as they call them, came into town, so to speak, they were helped out by the local, indigenous people. Regretfully, maybe, when you see now how touristy it's become and all that, but it's a good time. Now, when I was a kid, the river walk, which is very famous, was I would call it the creek walk. Most of the time when there was no rain, it would just be if anything, just a little trickle of water going down through the middle of town. Except when it rained really heavily and it started to flood. I think one of the best lines that I could never have written it by myself, but because I didn't have the context, but my dear David told me about, I know, I had seen a picture. I'm doing research. I went to the archives in San Antonio. It's the Mexican or Chicano library. It's on the Hemisphere grounds there. And I found these, a lot of photographs that I used for context and to fill in stuff, And I saw one of a flood where the water was really, really high on I think it was Commerce Street, Commerce or Houston Street. I mean, literally, I don't think anybody could have walked through it. It was so high. You'd have a boat. Michael David, when I was asking him about it, he said that the water was at 6 o'clock high. And I said, well, what do you mean? And I said, 6 o'clock high. Well, he said there was this very famous one of these huge old clocks, they have in the old days.
Oh, yeah.
And it was right on that street. And the water was so high that it had reached 6 o'clock. How the number would be on the bottom. So that's how he described it. I said, oh, God, and I put that in the story. It reached 6 o'clock. Well, how else could you come up with something like that unless you'd seen it? But I didn't see any context in it until he said the water was at 6 o'clock. He told me about the clock.
Jenny, did you have a question about scrounging, I believe?
Well, I mean,
You're frozen now.
it's kind of funny to bring up now because, yeah. Well, so I found a lot of sort of the main character's everyday life very relatable, because when he starts to build the scooter, like you said, he uses materials that he finds around, and the man who may or may not be multiple people who sort of gathers and maybe resells things that people don't necessarily throw in the trash. He gets something from him in exchange for helping him out and things. And when I was a kid, like most of us in the neighborhood would like find bricks and discarded sticks and our parents' old nails and whatever, and build toys and things like that. And it was I realized that now I throw a lot of things away, and it doesn't, and I feel very disconnected. And I liked that the book shows what I experienced as a kid, which was like people are sort of helping each other. Like people are literally building toys, but they're also like building community. Like I would even collect neighbors' recyclables and sell them, and then I would get money to go to the swap meet, and then with that money I'd buy somebody's old toys, and then I would sell my old toys to some other kid. Like it was always happening.
Yeah. Well, in those days too, it was probably left over from sort of the World War II days, where every bit of scrap metal was scrounged up. Scrounging. That was part of the war effort. So if you found something metal, well, we would donate it to they would have pickups. And there was this one character who I put in the book, who is the barrio collector of stuff, and he had a horse and a buggy, and be full of stuff, and he would sometimes you could barter with him for stuff, or you just have something that was no longer useful, and you stopping on his way along the street, and he would take it off your hands, and then he would probably find somebody else who could use that. It was kind of like a what do we have nowadays? Like a recyclable.
Oh yeah.
You are into that?
Chicano environmentalism.
Right. And my grandmother had like I say, my grandfather built the house that I grew up in, along with 8. They had 5. Yeah, there was 5 uncles, 2 aunts, and my mother. So it was, what was that? A lot of kids, 8 kids. And I was like the 9th one. And so there was a shed, and it was full of stuff. I mean, literally, there was stuff hanging from the ceilings, and there was this old Model A in the back of it. Been sitting there for generations, or for many years anyway. It was just a Model A, but must have been one of the first ones, that came out. I don't know how my grandfather got a hold of it, but it was still there, in the 1950s, probably in the 60s. And it was just a great place to look around in and find stuff. And there was, family history there. I could tell you some stories, which tell you later. Family lore.
Well, do
in
you
the
have
second
any?
book that kind of comes.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, I was just going to say in the second book that kind of comes into play, right? There's sort of like the discovery when going through things of something that might be a hint to the past.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I think everything. Well, in terms of like the Irish Mexican kid, I also. I mean, that was actually, you know, a mixture in the barrio. There were whites and, you know, some blacks and whatnot. And in this case, Irish Mexican kids were looked down by Irish, looked down by Mexicans. So they always got in trouble. That's why I make this kid in particular very feisty, you know. And but his uncles and his grandmother too, but and his mom, but his uncles had really gotten on his back about getting the fights, right? Which is pretty easy. I mean, sometimes getting fights over nothing, right? Just a fight. But this kid in particular was looking for a scrap, you know.
Yeah.
He just moved into the neighborhood, and he wanted to kind of, you know, get his territory set. And another thing where Noldo has to figure out a way to not get in a fight with a guy, you know. So that was part of the story too of not necessarily non-violence, but hey, don't be so stupid that you get in a fight over nothing, you know, or just territory. So that was a nice part of it. I think I think it was a conscious effort on my part to put some decent values, you know, out there, so that hopefully young readers would pick up on it and say, yeah, that's kind of cool. You just don't throw things away; you recycle them. Yeah, so I had a great time writing the stories.
I mean, well, Noldo has a progression. You know, he's a younger boy. He starts traveling time. He starts coming to his own, and then especially when, as you said, like he's a bit older. He's a teenager, young teenager when he goes confronts the Wizard of the Blue Hole. I mean, is there anything? Do you have any other plans for Noldo? Was the Blue Hole the last book in the series, or what do you think?
Well, actually, I have about 4 or 5 other ideas, but you know, life has kind of got in the way. Well, the last book, this one came out in 2018. Let's see, what was it? This also won an award, by the way, 2018. It's funny, but the first 3 books won awards with the International Latino Book Awards competition. For some reason, the 4th one didn't, right? But this one did. So I think they got tired of giving me the award. But it's cool because it to me it means that I wrote the best story in those years consecutively for young adults. So in the whole country, the whole U.S. So that's pretty cool.
What's one idea that you can say that what Nodal may be up to?
Oh man,
his next adventure.
Well, I want to have him doing getting into a mystery. Okay, whether he has to solve something, and it has to do with some a jade object. Okay, and of course jade is very precious stone in Mesoamerican culture and history and lore and so forth. So something about and then of course it's not going to be involving like murders or violence. It's probably more like somebody stealing something or other. You know, there's 2 or 3 other areas that I kind of forget right now, but that kind of stays in the back of my mind where he he runs across a mystery that no one else. It's kind of a old devices where no one realizes there's been a crime or something like that, but he discovers it, and then he teams up with a couple of people that he's done before. In the fourth book, I'm sorry, in Wizard of the Blue Hole, he meets the niece of the curandero, Don Manuel. He meets her, and she's just a really feisty and tough, gal. She drives this old Chevy that he's not sure, but it's got this. And of course, I have a picture of this, but of a little coupe like that, a coupe that someone cut the lid, the trunk lid out, okay, and put in a box with a drop-down lid so that to carry stuff. And she got a hold. She has this little kind of a self-made pickup, and drives that around like crazy. So I imagine her being involved in the next story. I hope I can get to it before the end of the year.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Keep your fingers crossed.
Keep your fingers crossed. Jenny, do you have anything else to put out there? Putting you on the spot.
I was kind of wondering, Scott and I were talking a little bit about this. Like, have you ever been interested in doing like an audiobook versions of any of these?
Yes, I have. Part of the problem is just financing it. You can't just knock it out like on a webinar. You really need a real good studio. And I know a good studio right here where I live in Berkeley. So that's not the problem. The facilities are definitely available. The price isn't too bad, but it does require time. If I were to read them, and I'm not that good a reader, so I probably would have to get somebody to read them for me. Especially since and because it involves Spanish and Calo or Pachuco talk, would have to be somebody who's bilingual and can say it just kind of the right way. But I guess the main issue is time and money. But yeah, definitely that's something I thought about. I thought about because people have asked me about my first book, Chicano Manifesto. Put that into an audiobook. That's about 300 and some odd pages. I have it here. Just happen to have a copy here. What is it like? It's about 300. Let me see. Let's see. Yes, about 320 pages, right? And it has Spanish in it. It has some Nahuatl words. So somebody that really has to be pretty good with bilingually, trilingually, whatever. So someday, I appreciate the thought. Well, can I say one thing though? As far as my interest in writing for young adults, I still don't think that enough is being written for this age group. There's a lot of stuff out there, more and more, but one of the, we have one of the youngest populations of any ethnic group, any population group, I should say, in the country. And it can only get bigger. It'll certainly be a consistently high, in some cases, a majority in many of the states, especially the Southwest. So I really want to promote other writers looking at this as a genre, that they can contribute to. There's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of ideas. I love writing these stories, and there's more stories I hope I can write. But yeah, that's probably the last point I'd like to make is to have more writers really focus on this population group. So
I agree. Well, thank you, Armando, and thank you, Jenny. Now I'm blanking.
thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, sure thing. It's great that, I mean, we have this talent right underneath our nose. I'm glad that we got to talk. Oh, there's the
original painting of the cover.
Yeah, that's the painting the cover.
Here, bring it up closer.
Oh, sure. We got action here.
Yeah.
Cameras rolling. See, there it is.
Wow.
Whoa.
Oh yeah, the battle's up there, and the he's not paying attention where he's going.
The artist, the artist's name is Joe Villarreal. He's a San Antonio artist, very popular, and he did this for me. Well, here's something interesting. He drew this, and he does a lot of sort of nostalgic work from the 40s and 50s. And so he made this kid wearing this T-shirt. I kind of describe it in the book, I guess, but he didn't read all that. We're talking about coincidences. I had this very same T-shirt, and I have a picture of myself when I was a bat boy for a team, a baseball team that one of my uncles played on. It was what they call a beer league in those days. This team was sponsored by the breweries in the San Antonio area, cantinas, that type of thing. And so I'm wearing a shirt just like this in this picture. I should have brought it out. Talk about coincidence.
Yeah, for real. That's pretty funny.
So I want to thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.